that is how you help.
And then what would that conversation look like?
She's like, let me turn your mic on.
Yeah, seriously. Like, what would that conversation then look like?
It can
if they
look
would
at
say, like,
all
how
kinds
can
of
I
different things.
support you?
And I think there's always a requirement to educate. And now in this day and age, there's really no excuse not to be educated. Access to information.
Yeah.
Books have been written specifically for white audiences and specifically for that problematic cross-section of white audiences that are like, I'm a good person. I don't see color. I have Black friends. My partner is Black or whatever. And actually, that's the hardest group to actually educate, because there is an element of self-righteousness therein. And one of the books that was written by a woman who actually is a white woman who she wrote White Fragility as well. And she talks about how she has gone to these talks, and when she walked in, she was like, yeah, but that's not me. And she had to have this sort of journey of being humbled and realizing, nope, I'm actually a person
Part of the system.
Yeah, that still lends to it and has to kind of accept that before I can then like come out of the other side of this process as someone who sees differently. I've literally seen the world with different eyes. So that's what's difficult, because of course they're not ever going to see the world through my eyes or my kids' eyes or
no,
any Black
they'll never be able
eyes.
to experience that.
Right. So like I think that sympathy versus empathy. Sympathy is like when you know exactly how it feels. Whereas empathy is I don't know exactly how it feels, but I can
imagine.
Yeah, and I can meet you where you are, and I can still feel with you in terms of I connect with you on the fact that you're hurt.
I can respect that you are hurting, but I myself would never understand
exactly how
that level of hurt.
Yes. But I respect.
I'm with you.
Yes,
like
I'm with you, and your experience as you describe it to me is sacred in that, because it's subjective. That's how you feel about it. I don't have a dog in this fight. I can't tell you, well, you should feel this way. Oh, well, that's this, because that's literally diluting my experience. How are you telling me how I should feel? As a person who lives in a world that perpetrates these feelings and this experience.
Right.
So that's what's a bit difficult to try and as I told you before, it's something that we're working towards, with also us being able to eventually have that conversation with them, because it has to happen.
So you are working towards that?
We are, because I mean, we've had the conversation, obviously, like as partners, about like, one, how we want to have the representation of both our cultures with our kids, bringing up biracial kids, all of those things that you discuss as normal parents, right?
Yeah.
And especially as parents of biracial children, but also, and bicultural. And understanding that there's also, at some level, soonish, an education of the people who are going to be around our kids' lives. If they're going to have access to these kids, they have to understand what these kids' experiences are going to be like, and understand what supporting them through that is like.
And advocate for them.
Exactly. And
in a respectful way, and not diluting it, like you said, the glasses example.
Exactly. And understanding why that is such a fucked up thing to say. So that obviously comes from education. Like, I can't sit there and be like, you're a terrible person and you're beyond help, because that's how you see it. But at the same time, if there's an openness to learning, great. Here's the information. Here's my experience. Here's the conversations that we have to engage in that are going to be super uncomfortable for you, that are going to awaken you, even in your old age, to behaviors that you thought are normal and thought processes that you didn't even know you harbored in your brain. You're going to have to admit that to yourself. It's a difficult, and you're going to probably fight back a little bit at some point, because one, that's human nature, and two, white fragility is a real thing. So I understand that process is coming and necessary, but before it happens, obviously, there's this gap. There's a void in that. And so I feel like if anything would happen, Dante has another experience at school that's racist, and I'm not there. Like, I can't imagine that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even though I know people would be like, oh my God, that sucks. I'm so sorry. The support that I know he needs, because I've been through that, because I was with him when he went through it the first 2 times, what he needs to hear to make him not suppress it, which is my experience growing up in a school full of white people who kept telling me that, who kept saying,
It's no big deal.
yeah, just walk it off.
Yeah.
You're being sensitive. The number of times we got told that at a freaking Christian,
by teachers or by classmates,
our dorm parents, teachers. So you have something innate that tells you this isn't right. This doesn't feel right that someone has said this to me. This doesn't feel right that you referred to me that way. So we would have our dorm parents, our people who are looking after us, say really racist shit to us. And you maybe come back to them and you say, well, I feel like that was kind of racist. And they'll laugh at you. They'll be like, why are you being so sensitive?
Completely
or
gaslighting.
We even heard,
before gaslighting
you people
was a term.
are always so sensitive. That's the kind of shit they were saying back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you actually start, because everyone's telling you that, you actually start being like, well, maybe I am.
Yeah.
Maybe I just need to be okay with this shit. And then you hear stuff around you all the time. And because you don't want to be told you're sensitive, absorb. And you're not only absorbing the behavior, you're absorbing the pain that goes with it. Of course, you're a human being. It's going to build up.
Yeah.
And it's not a healthy thing. So I don't want that to happen to them.
So you talked about educating. Do you feel like, as a Black woman, and I'm going to give you an example as an Arab, do you feel like it's your job to educate others? Because I, for example, have met Arabs, especially with everything that happened with October 7th, 9/11, like all those instances where Arabs were immediately labeled as terrorists, and Arabs have been like, it's not my role to educate. Let people think what they think. Like, do you feel like you, as Lisa, have a job, like a role to educate, or it's more like if someone approaches me and is open to learning, that's
then
where I provide.
I think it's like twofold, and I definitely can understand that sentiment that you just said with a lot of Arabs and even like Muslims, because there's so much like Islamophobia as well. And like with people who have said, it's not my job to fucking go out of my way to retell my story and my trauma just so that the person who's caused it can understand it.
Yeah.
So I totally understand that. I think a lot of Blacks also feel that way. It's not it's not the role, even that white woman says, it's not the role of the oppressed to educate the oppressor.
Then how does the oppressor learn?
Proactivity. They have to understand that there's a problem. There has to be, and that's why I'm saying, even in our situation, what I've noticed, even when things happen at school, as much as I can do these talks, for example, like anti-racism talks and that only gives me a platform of credibility because I've experienced it. But let me tell you, the world we live in, the voice that still speaks the loudest will be the white one. So when someone, for example, that coach goes off at Dante and I tell him to fuck off, yeah, he's going to cry like he did on the phone. But at the end of the day, he'll roll his eyes and be like another angry black mom.
Woman.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas when Michael responds to it as a white male,
he heard differently.
Exactly. Already when he opens his mouth, the reception is different. So when someone who is a part of the problem, so to say, but a party to the group of oppressors says, this is wrong, and this is why, there is, unfortunately, some sense of more legitimacy that comes from that voice. And there's always going to be more of a receptive ear to receive what he has to say, as opposed to me being like, you know what, this is be like, you know what, you're emotional. Of course, you've been through this. Yeah. You're triggered. You're hurt. There's going to be all of these things that, attached to, oh, well, and it dilutes whatever it is that I'm saying, even if it's completely factual, legitimate, there's the same bias that we're talking about eradicating has already hit. Like, the filter that they see me through is already up when they see me coming. Whereas you want to get people where there's no filter, almost like where, their guard is down. And that comes from a lot of people, white people, educating. Do I think, having like lived in many different white environments, that we should never, like as Black people, be like, you know what, it's not my role, it's not my fucking job to do it. Fuck it. Like, leave it. No. So having said that, it's not our role. I agree, it isn't. But do I feel like because there's really such a small amount of white advocacy so far, on some level we do have to. we do have to take that up, that role up or that job up and actually educate people, then you know what? Generationally, that can move on and those white people can then become advocates for it. But it's such a slow process and frustrating. And it does entail you going back into your trauma,
Right.
suppressing it because you still want to be heard and what you're saying to be legitimized above the hurt. Because as soon as you start crying about it, as soon as you say, and get emotional,
Then it's lost.
credibility lost.
It's lost.
So yeah, so it's difficult. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of the dichotomy. I can understand the sentiment. It's not my job to educate. I agree with it. It isn't. But lack of proactivity and interest and comfort with status quo being what it is, unfortunately, we have to on some level. And for me personally, if it was just me, I'd be like, it's not my role to do it. If I see something or if something happens to someone or to me, I'm going to speak up. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to like go off. But now that I have these kids who are going through it and they're in an environment where they're going to go through it repeatedly
Over and over.
unless I speak up,
Yeah.
I have to. I have to do it. So,
You have to advocate for them.
yeah. And if that means educating people and going out there and being uncomfortable and hearing those stupid questions and being like,
Yeah.
let me explain this to you. And, putting on like that face of, yes, I'm totally like, an unaffected, objective Black person speaking
Yes.
about this.
That gives me chills just now.
Yeah, because listen, you have to go to a place where you're literally, and I'm going to put it as bluntly as possible, you're talking to, you're basically, you have to befriend your colonizer. You're speaking to the enemy and you have to learn his language, be gentle about his feelings.
Mhm.
So as you speak, you're not thinking about how do I protect myself from this person who I already know has this negative idea of me. You're thinking, how can I make them comfortable? Which is such a twisted thing in the brain because you're like, this is my oppressor, and I have to be wary of how talking about my oppression that won't make them feel uncomfortable.
That's such a mind fuck.
It really is.
Because
It really is.
I'm curious now then to see how does that seep into the rest of like to other elements of your life where
With-
you're like just from a mindset standpoint, like you're having to tread lightly.
That's why it's
around,
hard for us to be
like-
in environments where we don't have community. You don't have someone else that you can look at and be like, girl, you know?
I got you. Like,
yeah. Even if you don't have a conversation, just that nod that like, okay, I'm not by myself. I'm not alone. My kids are not going to grow up being the only kids that go through this. That helps a little bit. So it's really hard. That's why Black people will be like, all right, we're moving here or we're traveling here. First Google search will be, how many Black people they got there? And the second search will be,
where are we gonna find them?
yeah, literally, where are they at and how do they treat them? Literally, that was the funniest thing. Like when I talked to Michael, and
Did
I was
you
like,
not do that for Munich?
no, I was in love. I still am, but I was like, well, I knew what to expect. I had visited, so I was like,
Yeah.
yeesh. But even when you're traveling, and it was funny because I was talking to Michael, and I'm like, when you guys travel, you're just like, what are the beaches like?
Yeah.
What is the diving situation? What is the food like? Can I use my local currency? These are the questions you ask. When we go somewhere, we're like, what kind of visa, first of all?
Yeah.
Literally, how do they treat Black people is if not the first question, is the number 2 question. Yeah. And he was like, really? I'm like, you gotta. Because you could go somewhere for vacation and turn up missing.
Yeah.
It's no joke out here. So that's, I think, a part of it is just having the community, like having people around you who you can be like, all right, you know what? Let's draw strength from one another. And that's why those communities exist, because people understand the necessity for it. But also, I think, on the other hand, dealing with the mindfuckness of that is also, in my opinion, some places are just worth being. If it is, I think it's different when you have kids. Certainly for me, it's just your level of tolerance for what you think is manageable or appropriate for your kids to experience is is relative. It's different for everybody. But yeah, for me, in my experience, I've been like, some things are just like, if I can help it, if I can protect my kids from this, I can lessen this, then of course I'm going to do it. That's my role as a parent. So some places you're like, listen, I can educate every single hour of my life for the rest of my life, and my kids do the same thing, and their grandkids will still have the same exact experience that I've had. It's not going to change in 2, 3 generations because it's very gradual. The soil is not ready to be cultivated, so to speak. People aren't ready or receptive, and yeah, and then that's when you just say, okay, it is what it is.
And is
Um,
that where you feel like is that what you feel about here now? Like officially labeled it as not worth being here? Or you're
um,
still,
I
that's
think
still
I
up for
labeled it
debate?
that way for a number of reasons,
Yeah.
not just because of that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that, like, of course, in every average, there's always outliers. So there's obviously, that doesn't mean that there's like, it's just a cesspool of terrible people. There's good people, and there's obviously reasons that are redeeming, but it's different when you look through it as from the eyes of a parent. If it was just me as like a 25-year-old being like, I'll try it out for 5 years, like I could firm it, I could do it, um, and make the most of it, and still
Hmm.
be like, this shit sucks, but what can I find that can make it bearable and even good on most days? But a big part of parenting is shielding, preparing, equipping, but also shielding where we can, like mitigating risk. So yeah, I mean, which is the whole reason why I wouldn't move my young black men, my sons, to America, because oh
No.
my God, that would be, the most.
You're asking for it,
Honestly, you're
like,
like going into the belly of the beast.
yeah.
When like my sister tells me that she literally has told my nephew that he every time he leaves the house that he should never put his hoodie on,
Um,
like from the age of like 5,
it's
which is
just that's insane.
yeah,
But it's a reality that
it's the
she
reality.
has to teach her child that
Yeah,
because
yeah. And for her, staying in that environment, equipping him as best she can, praying and hoping for the best. Um, for her, that is a manageable environment for her. Which, yeah, like I said, it's subjective. For me, it would not be manageable. I would not.
you would not be able to handle it.
I couldn't. I couldn't. I don't know if I sent you that ad. I don't want to say the company because I know the company actually has some was a leaf falling off the plant. I was like, oh, it sounded like someone's creeping in the window, but we're looking right at it and I can't see anything. It's an ad by a company that I know is problematic because they do a lot of good advertising, but they're actually like under the radar problematic when it comes to race. I'll tell you after. But I don't know if I sent you this ad. It came up on my feed a week or two ago, and it was essentially saying It was about let's have the conversations that we don't want to have, so that we don't have to have them anymore. And it was basically all these different scenarios of black parents, like this little boy being chased home by these white kids, and the mom being like, I know that it hurts to be called that, but it's going to happen for the rest of your life, and you have to know how to deal with it. And this little girl, like, going to this mom, like, brushing this girl's hair, and she says in the beginning, she's like, "That's not a compliment. Like, she should never have said that to you." So that's the beginning of it. All these different scenarios, and then there's one scenario where, like, this girl goes to this school, and you can tell that it's like this fancy school, and they're driving her there, and the mom says, you I know it's going to be hard and I know how you feel, but you're going to have to work twice as hard and be twice as good just to get half as far.
Yeah.
And then there's the one that killed me. I'm already getting choked up. Was a mom in the car with her daughter, like teaching her how to drive, like the daughter's 16. And the mom says, oh, kills me too. Anyway, the mom says, all right, what do you do when you get pulled over? She's like, Mom, I'm not going to be speeding. I'm like, I'm not going to like, da-da. And she goes, this is not about you getting pulled over. This is about you making it home.
Oh my God.
And the daughter says, I'm going to be fine. And then she pauses and she goes, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah, like killed me. Then there's this mom where she's like sitting at the table with her son, and he's got like his drumsticks because he's going to like music class or whatever, and it's like dark, and she's like, "You have your ID on you?" And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "All right, so you come straight home afterwards." And da 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 da. And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, I know." And he leaves, and then you see another shot of her, and she's sitting at the table, and she's just like, and she's just like
Waiting,
worried, and
like
he's
worried.
like walking home at night. Yeah, and it was so full on, and I was like, that is America. For me, like maybe some people's experience has been different, but I know people who've had experiences like that, and I know people who have to go through that process of preparation. And I was like, for me,
That's I'm not doing that to my
I
kids.
can't even talk about it without like tearing up. So I'm like, I already know I don't have the strength to deal with that. And for the people who have to, or who are in an environment where they say this is something I have to live with, and or I can't get out of it, like kudos to them. But if I have the tools, the ability to avoid things like that, of course, I have to. It's my role as a parent. But yeah, it's oh, so with the one with the little girl, so it starts with the mom, and she's like, that's not a compliment. Goes through all the other scenarios, and then at the end, it goes back to that mom with her daughter, and she says, "You're not pretty for a black girl. You're beautiful." I know. It's full on, right?
Full on. No, you did
Because
not
like
send me
so many of
that.
us have all been like told that.
You've been in, like, you can feel that.
Right? Like it's so good. And I wish I could post it, but yeah, like I said, the company I
It's
did like,
controversial.
you know how I like to do my like backstory research.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, but wait. And I was like, oh, but they really do quite really good ads. Whoever's doing their PR is, they know what they're doing, because that like yanked at the heartstrings, but it was so accurate because so many of those instances were so like
Accurate.
all of us,
Like
all of us.
they're,
I
like,
know
real life
every
experiences.
single black person who watched that was like,
Feeling
I've had at least 2 or 3 of those instances, or I've been told, had to be told that exact same thing. All of us, like you can literally identify with almost every single instance of it. So I was like, damn, that's full on.
that is.
Yeah. So, but yeah, like what the tag was that let's have those conversations that we don't want to have, so that we don't have to, so we get to the point where we don't have to have
Right.
um, something like that. Like fucking up the tagline, but essentially you get the gist of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, like that's where the whole difficulty of having to like go into the bag of your trauma and your pain to educate has to come from. So it's not just having the conversations with your kids, it's also about having the conversations with the parents that are going to have kids
That are
playing with
going to
your
do
kids.
that to your
Exactly.
kids.
Exactly. So, and in some cases, like now, did I tell you they asked me to go back to speak to when
The
I was
older
at the school
kids?
the other week? Yeah, they were like, "Can you come and speak to the older kids?" I think the year sevens. I was like, you know how I'm scared.
I know,
Teenage,
but it's so
teenage
important.
boys, they're so
I know, and
teenagers in general.
you did so well with your kids' class that like it would be.
I know, and I think it's a great thing, and I'm like, I'm glad they have the resource on file. Like, so I understand like the purpose of it is really good, but one, I'm scared shitless of public speaking. Two, kids are fucking brutal. Like high school kids, like we used to like terrorize.
We any new new blood
Sub,
like substitute teachers were just
they would never be seen again.
No.
Anyway, but I'm hoping that like it resonates, because like they're at the age now. What I realized is they're at the age where now they can go home and teach their parents.
Exactly.
So that I think, and going back to the open ears to the right teacher, like your kid is going to be the voice that you're more likely to listen to as well. Yeah.
And those are the parents, like your in-laws, who are uncomfortable having those conversations. And that's
I don't
why
even think that they are uncomfortable. My in-laws, I think, are because I haven't gotten that discomfort from them really. What I've gotten is because you know there's the whites who are like, I don't want to like talk about this issue, but I think they're just more like, it sucks, but I don't really see it as a big issue. Like, let's
Right.
just know that there's people who are idiots and ignorant, and let's forge on. Like, we're happy and we love you guys, and da, da, da. And I'm like, which is even harder to navigate because I'm like, they don't even see that there's a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I said, is that cross section of the people who are actually convinced that they are, what's the name of that book? Nice Racism, it's called. People who actually are convinced that I'm actually an ally, and we love you, and we legitimately see you as like the same, and we think people who are racist are fucking awful. I don't need to look into myself and think about my inherent biases. I'm a good person. That's the hardest.
I
So
feel like that's where, they're like uncomfortable with having that conversation. There's a level of, they're like dismissing it in a way. And
I don't even think of it. They don't even see it as
they
a
themselves
conversation.
will have people in their circles that
You
are
think.
gonna, so they have
Yeah.
they now have to have a responsibility to educate their circles.
And that's my point. And it might not even be the circle. It might be extended family. It might be,
Yeah.
their friends, their closest friends. And the thing is, that's what I'm saying is a problem. They haven't even gotten to the point where the conversation might be a problem, because they're like, a conversation doesn't need to happen. So even when I would approach it, so if I was to say, hey, we need to have a conversation about racism so that I can help, like if I actually sat down and said that, I think the reaction very genuinely would
We
be,
don't need to.
I know it's been, but we'll do everything we can to like make you guys feel accepted. End of story.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, we've acknowledged that you've said that it's been difficult, and we have done our best to like make it easier, and we love you, and that's it. Like,
Because
really,
they don't want to face the reality.
but that's the thing. I don't even think that they feel that there is a reality different from what they see.
I see.
You see the difference?
I see.
So
what
there's
you
ones
mean.
who are like, okay, this is uncomfortable. Like, I understand, but like, I just really don't want to go through this process that might be painful, that might be uncomfortable, and highlight things I'm not ready to talk about. It's like nothing else exists. This is the only reality,
Yeah.
which is, it sucks. Sorry. We're good to you. We love you. We love the kids.
Yeah.
And, we're good people.
Yeah.
So, like, you should be happy. You should feel perfectly.
Yeah.
And on some level, actually, there is a guilt about that in us as Black people, too, because there's always the idea of, it could be way worse, Like, I know
Yeah.
so many of my friends who are in interracial marriages where
They're not
it
accepted.
is the ghetto when it comes to the relationship with the in-laws. Like, their kids can't even visit their in-laws because they're just like, we don't want to interact. We don't want to. And if that means that we don't see our grandkids, then fuck it.
They're
Like,
okay
to
with that.
point. Yeah. I have a sister whose in-laws are like that. They've never like reached out, spoken to my parents, nothing. Yeah.
For me,
So,
that's just,
it's crazy, right? And so, like, for me, and then the stuff that they say, like when they see my sister, because my sister's like, I'll just go there once a year, Christmas, that's it, and then we go. And like the shit that they say to her. The good thing is her man is gone through a process as well where he's educated himself. He's fucking stands up for them. Like, so that's a really good thing. But like, so I look at my situation, I'm like, they're not even half that bad. They're not even objectively bad. They're good people. They're kind. They're lovely. They've accepted me. They, can't wait to like be a part of my family and like meet my family and come to my village. Like, there's all these things that I'm like, I should just be like thankful. And there's even some people in my life who have been like, girl, if it ain't broke,
leave it alone. Like, don't rock the boat.
Take the win. And so on some level, you've had that feeling where you're like, I should be like just okay, because at least I'm like a 3. People are living with like a 7 and an 8.
But that's also subjective. Like, what appears to be a 3 for you could actually very well be a 9 or a 10 because it involves your kids.
Exactly.
So,
and for me, that is the thing. In fact, for me, it would be a 0.
Yeah.
For me, just on my own, I'd be like, actually, I don't see a problem.
Yeah.
It's fine. Because, but like, because it's an environment where my kids largely don't have another community here where You know, there's not going to be a lot of other parents who are like us, biracial. There are
Yeah.
not going to be a lot of kids who are like, mate, I know exactly what you're going through. I went through
Yeah.
this, and like that trading of stories, which is very therapeutic as well and leads to healing. Like they're not going to have that. So where are they going to get that? They're going to
Yeah.
get that only from us, and I can't give them all of it by
No.
myself.
You need that. You need that community. You need that
Yeah,
support system.
yeah, yeah, and I think they need it too. So if it's not something that exists, it's my role as a parent to help create it.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether it's by myself, but also putting pillars and structures in place that also can, you know, can build it for them. So I guess that's what I'm trying to do. So, you know, I actually don't even anticipate it would rock the boat. I think that it would be, which is the usual reaction for people who find it difficult to actually, you know, look within and accept, oh my God, I have these biases. I think it'll be more the, God, I'm so hurt that I thought I was doing so well, and I'm still like hurting you, or I'm still not where I should be. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be a little bit more of that type of a reaction where it's very introspective, but also like, you know, like sorry for myself.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, get past that. Now we start
Now
the work.
let's
But
the
we'll see
work
what
comes
happens. I
in.
think it's also a process. Like it's not gonna happen overnight. It's gonna be a lot of talks. It's gonna be a lifetime of like, okay, let me tell you why this is not appropriate.
Yeah.
But I think the best part also, I was speaking to my dad about this because I talk to my dad about my experiences a lot because he was living in the
In the
States
US.
in
Yeah.
the 60s, yeah, as like an
His
African immigrant.
experiences,
Yeah.
man. He
Yeah, his stories are insane. And this one, I think I've heard all of them. He has another one. I'm like, Dad, when did you study? Because you guys are just always getting into it. Like, how did you finish college? Anyway, and then his excuse at the end of it, yeah, it's the 60s. You know? I'm like,
who studied?
yeah. He's like, you know, I had like 15 jobs. I'm like, when were you studying? Anyway, so I tell him like my stories, and I'm like, I know it sounds soft because you like actually went through like real shit, but like, and he's like, no, it's hard because it's hard, and he's always been really empathic about it, and really good at sort of like putting words to what I'm trying to express in terms of the feeling. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so good to hear someone who can legitimize my experience. Because at some level, you're like, am I just weak
Yeah.
and dramatic?
Yeah.
So hearing that has been really therapeutic. But when I speak to him, he's like, well, you know, I think it's also really good for them to come to our village, and we'll take them down into like the village, the town part, where for a few minutes they will have the experience that you have every day,
Yeah.
which is
Because
everyone
they'll be
staring at
the
them
yeah.
and people and stopping, and he said, and not to make them uncomfortable, he said, I think it's really important for them to even on some level have a small idea of what your life is like there, because you can tell them about it, you can tell me about it, but if I'm not experienced it, I'm not really going to be able to
Yeah.
relate to what you're talking about. And I was like,
Oh my God, please do that.
so I mean, it was already planned because it's part of like the village.
But you
visit,
need to
but I
also
think
then
it's-
explain
oh
afterwards.
yeah.
You know, like don't
yeah.
just do it and then be like, wait for them to say something because
No.
you know it's not coming.
No. And also, I think they will actually say something. They will, because also it's the best part is the kids, because the kids will like just point.
Yeah.
They'll just be like,
Yeah.
you know, and they'll say stuff, and then I know someone will be like, "What did they say?" I'm like, "You don't want to know."
That's
for me,
my life. Every
going
day,
around the corner in Munich every single day.
just to go to the supermarket.
Yeah, and it's still not going to be the same because like there's no threat to their safety, for
No.
example. They're not like, they don't have to be in fear of the fact that like their kids are going to possibly get, you know, shoved onto train tracks when they're coming home from school by themselves, you know, shit like this that happens here. Whereas that's, I don't even want to think about shit like that.
No.
Yeah. So, but it's hard. It's really hard to navigate. And you know, I came into this whole sort of environment being like, I know my shit. I've read these books. I've been around, you know, sort of different cultures and races for most of my life. I lived outside of my own race for a long time. I know how to navigate. Humbled me.
Oh, damn.
I realized I don't know shit about shit. And part of it is also learning about myself. to be able to understand that emotional intelligence. So not just being able to be like, I see that they're feeling this way, but to be able to regulate my approach to meet them where they are. So recognize where they are, but also to be able to say, Lisa, you need to actually be aware of how you relate or communicate to be able to, actually have more weight be given to the words that you're saying by someone who is at a different emotional point or
Yeah.
point of receptiveness.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's forced me to do some of that emotional intelligence work.